All right, so let's ask one of the most fundamental questions associated with this data set, which is which authors are making us money? You know, when I when I opened this data set for the first time, this was the first question I asked myself because it, to my mind, would drive so many of the decisions you would make as the store owner, right? Like how much of the of each shelf should be dedicated to a particular author, or how much of my inventory should I dedicate to a particular author, or if I have a display in the middle of the store, which books should I put there? Which authors should I invite in for a book signing? Like so many things depend on which authors or which books are making you money, and it turns out that that's a difficult problem to answer in Tableau because of the way Tableau deals with the level of detail and because of the way this particular data set is set up. So let's see what I mean there. So let's start a new sheet. And to get started, we're going to talk first about the author. So we'll go scroll up and let's do author last name. And then what we want to do is we want to go through all of the possible orders all of the orders that we've made, and find the prices of all the books that a particular author has sold, and then sum those all up. So we want a sum of all these prices, but the naive solution is not going to work. So let's actually do the naive solutions and remind ourselves why this is a problem. So if we go down to addition here, and we drag in price, and then we change this to discrete so it's easier to look at, what we're seeing here is, remember, it's all about the level of detail of the view. So this particular variable comes from the author data sheet. This particular variable comes from the edition data sheet, and that's the only two variables we have in our visualization right now. So the level of detail stops at edition. We have authors have books, books have editions, but because that's what's in our visualization, the level of detail of the view stops there. So when this is saying sum here, it's only taking into account the different editions that an author has published. It's not taking into account all of the orders of those editions that we've made in our store. And let me say this a slightly different way. So if we go down to, let's look at the data itself. So if we look at the data by clicking the little view data icon and go to the sales, each sale has an order ID, each sale has an item ID, and each sale has an ISBN. This ISBN is related to the edition, but notice that because we're selling the same book over and over and over again, this level of detail at the sales level is a finer level of detail than the edition layer. Like we have authors have books, books have editions, and editions have sales. So we're moving down like to finer and finer and finer detail as we move through here, but the visualization as it currently stands stops at edition. So hopefully there's a little part of your brain that's tingling that's saying like, wait, I want to do a computation at a level of detail that's finer than the one that's currently in the visualization. I need a level of detail expression to make that happen. Remember, level of detail expressions are the ways we tell Tableau, I know that the visualization has the current level of detail, but I actually want to perform a computation at a different level of detail. That's the big idea. So let's see how that happens. Before we write the level of detail expression, we have to decide what are we going to fix. So this is the hard part, and it requires, in the best case, like knowledge of the data collection process here. So, you know, if you were running the bookshop, you would know what order ID meant, and you would know what item ID meant, and you would know everything about this data set and how it's generated. For us, though, let's think about this as, and you can actually kind of see it, that there are relationships between these, like there's an order ID and then some identifier assigned to it, and there's an item ID, and let's think about that as each item inside an order gets its own identifier. Does that make sense? So each item ID should be unique. Like items are then grouped into orders. So we really do need to fix both the order and the item. Like that's the pair that we want. So think of like order 1, item 2, item 3, item 4. Order 2, item 1, item 2, item 3, item 4. And so in that way we need to fix like both of these things, both the order and the item, in order to get a unique identifier for each one of our sales. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. Let's make a new calculated field. And we're going to call this price fixed because we're fixing the price. And what are we fixing it at? Well, we're going to fix it at the order ID. And then if I want to supply another one, I can just do that. So I want to do order ID and item ID. And so what this says, and then for each one of those, I just want to sum the price. Notice that for each order ID, item ID pair, there's only going to be one price. And so when we say sum, it's just to make the calculation work. You could do average, you could do the first one, the only one. I mean, it just doesn't really matter. The min, the max, like whatever aggregation you want, because there's only ever one thing here. Each order item pair has a unique price, so it doesn't matter how you aggregate it. So let's take a look at this and see how it goes. So I'm going to take price fixed. I have a new variable in my workspace. It belongs to the sales data sheet. Why is that the case? Let's go back and look at it again. It's because the things that I'm fixing on here, order ID and item ID, both belong to the sales data sheet. Both this order ID and this item ID belong to sales, and so my new variable does too. So when I drag this in, again, I'm going to aggregate. Like it has to aggregate, but that's okay because now, notice how different this is. I'm going to fix my format too while I'm here. So remember, to fix formatting, you just click on the thing, right click, and then I'm going to change this to currency. So notice what a big difference this is. Like if we had done the naive way where we are not paying attention to level of detail, I know it's so silly to say this, but we would have thought that Antrim, the author, earned us in total over the course of the year $29 or $30. Let's be generous. Where in practice, when we do this correct with the level of detail in place, Antrim actually makes us $1,700. And it gets even worse. Like Danticat is a good example. So Danticat is a big-time author. I think they have like 8 books or something like this, 7 books maybe. Anyway, the total sum of all the prices of all those editions is about $75, whereas Danticat actually made us $75,000. So this is a huge difference, and it's really important to get this right. The details depend. The details depend on what that level of detail you want to perform your calculation at actually is. And it varies problem to problem. So in this case, just to back it out a little bit, we were thinking like, we want to sum up all the prices of all the books that this person has sold in our store. Okay, well, how did they sell those books? They sold those books in orders. Okay, but each order could be comprised of multiple books. So for instance, maybe in this particular order, they sold, order 1 had items 1, 2, 3, and 4, and items 3 and 4 were actually the same book. We should count both of those. And therefore, the thing that we want to fix isn't just the order, it isn't just the item, it's actually the order item pair, so that we can actually see item 1, 3, item 1, 4, oh, those have prices, and I want to add those prices up. It's tricky. It really is tricky, and in my personal opinion, it's the hardest technical part of Tableau. And the reason it's hard is because Tableau makes other things so easy. Because of this paradigm that the level of detail stops at the level of detail of the visualization, and that works really well most of the time. But because of that assumption, anytime we want to operate outside of that framework, we have to do it custom, and we have to be very particular about what we mean. The details really, really matter. And maybe I'll put together another video to show you all the ways this can go wrong. It really, it's very complicated, and a lot of it depends on detailed understanding of the data set itself, which is hard to come by. It really does. There's no substitute for time. You just have to explore the data set a lot to say like, oh, like item IDs are not unique, or oh, sometimes people buy multiple copies of the same book in an order. All of these details matter when you think about what you should fix and what you shouldn't. And so sometimes it's a matter of really getting to know a data set well before we can write these level of detail expressions effectively.